Hey, Rome, how are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Yourself?
I'm doing all right. I'm excited that we are here talking about the release of your book. And I know it came out just a short while ago, but I'm excited that we can finally have our conversation to share it with the world that your book is here and it's available and all of those awesome things. So I would love to start because those who are watching this might not know who you are. So I would love if you can just kind of start us off with just a little bit about yourself and your background, and then kind of the catalyst to why publishing your book was so important to you.
My name is Jerome, but I go by Rome. I come from a small family in Massachusetts, and publishing this book was the closure to everything that I've ever been through traumatically in my life.
Mm. So your book, okay, so number one, let's backtrack a second. Will you describe what your book, like how your book is structured? Just because I am so in love with the structure of this book and just the way in which you write in your words. But for somebody just kind of watching this, they have no idea, obviously your website's tapped poetry. So that's probably an indication that it's poetry, but can you just kind of describe like what your style is first?
So my style of writing is basically the way that I talk. I want everything to always come off as authentic, and it's obviously poetry. So the way that I wrote this book, I had hundreds of poems, and every poem was an individual story, but I didn't have a full story. So after writing the entire book, I went back and placed every poem in chronological order, filled in the gaps, and then I had a complete story from beginning to end.
Can you
in poetic format?
Yeah, and so to me, it's kind of like, I think of it like almost like an Eminem song, like the type of poetry, like the rhythm and the beat to it versus, I don't want to say like dry poetry, but like to me, there's nothing dry about your style at all. Like it's very, very compelling. Can you show your book? My copy is not on my desk, but can you show your book just to show like the thickness even of this beauty? Oh, so good. Yeah. So from it looks so good. I'm obviously impartial because we work together on this, but I'm just so proud. It looks beautiful and amazing. Can you describe, just for those watching, because it's kind of like a mix of people who are watching. There's a mix of people who watch these because they want to publish their own books, and there's other people who are just curious kind of about the process. But just the process of stringing together all of those individual poems that you had, because you had a lot of them.
The process was grueling, to say the least, because, like I said, I had written it all out of order. So then to go back and I really had to dig deep inside my mind just to write these poems. Like, people don't realize, every poem is a complete story. And in order to write a story for every poem to lead to the next poem, to the next poem, to the next poem, and make it all fit, I literally wrote this book 6-7 times, including once after you said, okay, we're good to go. So
yeah,
it was tough.
To me, so my PSA for people who are watching this, who are writing a memoir, because the reason why, so PYP does not have any other poetry books. Yours is the only one. And simply because it is your memoir, it's just in poetry format. And I think there's something so beautiful and so creative about the ability to do what you just said in terms of concretely and cohesively make these one poem lead into the next that leads into the next that actually becomes your life story. So for those who are watching this and they're thinking about writing their memoir, and writing a memoir is not an easy process, regardless of what style or format you're doing it in. But I would say if you're stressed about putting your story on paper, I would say take a look at what Rome has done, because I feel like if you can do that with your story, anyone can get their story written, because your book is so packed with trauma points. It's not just like one isolated traumatic incident, but it is a whole series of 400 plus pages of traumatic instances.
Right.
So how is that from an emotional standpoint? Like, just because I know that you just said that, you basically rewrote it so many times, but even just like when you started doing this, maybe before you even knew it was going to become a book, like what was, do you have any processes around just dealing with the emotional ups and downs that have come?
Well, the truth is that this book stemmed from anger. When I began writing this book, I was beyond angry, and it affected me so much mentally that I ended up in the hospital because I had had a severe anxiety attack. And the doctor had told me, you need to find an outlet. And the outlet needs to be something that you can let this all go. And he was like, do you write? And I told him, well, I write some poetry on Facebook. And he was like, well, maybe you should consider writing. And several people had told me, well, you should write a book. And ultimately, Tapped became my book based upon years of holding everything inside.
And did it work as the doctor suggested it would, that it like really helped in some way?
It worked more than I ever thought that it would help, to be honest with you. I found myself, I could give you some examples. A relative read the book and they said, Jerome doesn't swear. This book is filled with curse words because it made sense. Like there were sentence enhancers. Like you have to throw them around in order to get. My whole thing was I wanted you to feel this book. I didn't want to just write a book and explain my story. I wanted you to feel everything that I felt. And my goal was to change the way people view poetry. I didn't want this to be just another poetry book. I wanted this to be the poetry book. And so when I started writing it, that was the goal. And then it spiraled. Like everything just flowed, like the emotions. I cried during this book. I went to the hospital during this book. I poured everything I had into just getting everything off of my mind.
I love that you kind of had the outcome of having that. I don't want to say clarity because it's not clarity, but kind of like freedom or space from your past. You know, like it was like a healing moment, if you will, or a series of healing moments.
I wouldn't have believed it beforehand as much as the after effect of the way it felt, just knowing that it was done. Like I could say, okay, I'm done with that. And before I never felt like I could say I'm done with that. It always was on the back of my mind. And that's what people don't understand about mental illness, is that you can look fine, you can act fine. Nobody knows. Like I had someone message me the other day and the question was I good to you in high school? Just because they wanted to make sure that they didn't abuse me in any way.
Wow. That's such an interesting thing to have happened. And what was your response to them? Kind of curious.
Absolutely. Like I was a popular kid in school. Like I was outgoing, and then I got home and went through the motions.
Wow. Oh, that's really, I feel like I haven't heard that happen yet, where someone reaches out with like such a profound question. Like, was I kind to you? That's really,
you'd be surprised, because those are the questions I was expecting from family members. So for that to come from friends, people that really shouldn't worry about that type of thing, it made me feel good that someone cared, to be honest with you.
Yeah, which is good for everyone's emotional health and mental health. So did you have any, any surprising parts of the process, whether it's from the writing process or even just the book becoming, like, getting published and getting out there? Was anything surprising to you?
How hard it is to publish a book. I thought the most difficult part was pouring my everything into writing a book. I'm like, I'm writing this book, it's going to be published, blah, blah, blah. I finished and then it stalled. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I doing now? They say, I went on the internet, I Googled, they said, you have to write a query letter. I sent out hundreds of query letters, not for us. And I'm like, oh no, now what do I do? And luckily enough, things worked out the way they did.
Yeah. And like I said, like, we've not published a poetry book before. So it's kind of a gamble on both of our parts to say, like, let's try this together and get it out there. And I am just so happy with the finished product because it's so creative. And, you know, as someone who publishes memoir and nonfiction mostly, there's not, the books are creative, the words are creative, all of the content in there's creativity, but visually, oftentimes they're not super creative because it's a book. It's black and white. It's a standard font usually. It's a standard size. But with yours, there's just so much beauty because there's so much visual appeal to it as well, which I think is just kind of an awesome kind of component to it too.
Right. Well, on our initial conversation, I had told you that like I'm going to wow you, and I'm going to change the way you view poetry, and everything had to be wow. The words had to be wow. The poetry had to be wow. The concept had to be wow, and the book cover had to be wow.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I started working with Bailey, her ideas, my ideas, the ideas of Chris Cruz, who is a magnificent designer and one of my good friends, everything came together so that the inside became wow. And I'm totally stoked about the outcome.
And I just got chills thinking about this because I think that you're right, because the words and the content and the structure and the way that you do it all has a wow factor that if that had just been put into a standard black and white template type of format, I don't think it would have had the same effect that it does now, because it's just so, to me, it's intense. Like that's the word that I would use. Like the content is intense, your writing is intense, and the visuals I think are intense. And I say intense in like a good way, if that's even possible, like a powerful way, powerful intensity.
The funny thing is like I have people saying to me, I picked it up because I thought it was a murder mystery. Like, and that was my intent. I've said it before. I was like, this looks like a murder mystery. But to have people like corroborate that, to say, yeah, I didn't think that was a poetry book. Mm-hmm. Like I have friends looking at other friends like, where did you get that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, will you show the cover up again, so that way those who they were looking at it before, just to kind of get that murder mystery feel. Yeah, there's definitely dark. There's some darkness to it. Yeah, and we have a link in the description below this video, as well as scrolling along the bottom of the screen. So if anyone wants to go check it out, I highly encourage you to. Obviously, I'm biased, but I definitely encourage you to. So, what other, I know that you were just said that you had that person reach out to you from high school. Have you had other kind of interesting things that have come up as a result of the book actually being out, whether it's family members or friends or people close to you who've read it and like now they know more things than you ever wanted them to, or people that are completely removed? Like what's that experience been like?
In a lot of ways, friends have been supportive. I've had all positive reviews, Amazon reviews, all 5-star reviews. I think there are 11 up there. Mm-hmm. That's all been great. I had 2 negatives, and they were both family members. One family member said I made the entire family look like a bunch of scumbags. The other family member hasn't spoken to me in over a month. Both because they feel that I did the family disservice by publishing. Mm-hmm.
And now so like if you're speaking to someone else who might be in a similar situation where they've written their story and they're putting it out there and they're already kind of getting that pushback from family members, do you have any advice that you would share, or anything that you are currently doing?
Yeah, my advice would be to do what's best for you. You're not going to please everyone. You cannot please everyone. And there's always going to be someone that tries to keep you down under their nail. And that goes with anything in life. Mm-hmm. I'd say to follow your heart.
That's such a perfect way to summarize it. It's so often that a lot of times we don't put our stories out there and we don't tell the full truth because we are afraid of who's going to judge us or what people are going to say about it or who we might lose in our life. But, at the end of the day, it's not us as the author's fault how other people behaved and how they're then subsequently written about. And I think we always have to remember that, to speak your own truth.
The most difficult thing is that I wrote this in a poetic format. And I don't think that poetry is for everyone in such a way that I don't believe certain people read this the way it was intended to be read. I think some people came into it looking for things that may not belong to them, and then started taking ownership of things that don't belong to them.
It's a really interesting way of phrasing it. Yeah, I think that happens a lot for a number of people where, they just have it out for you, and they're looking to find the flaw or the fault in what you've created. And I know that we went through painstaking detail to protect identities of people and certain things. And, that's just common practice when it comes to memoirs and putting your story out there, is that, you don't blatantly want to throw out all of your information and family names and addresses and be like, hey, go, this person wronged me. So to me, when it comes to memoir, if someone wants to kind of raise the fight or drama or whatever it is with you as an author, anyone watching this as an author, if they first have to acknowledge, like, hey, that's me, that's been written about, even though their identity is completely protected. So no one would know it's that person unless they rose their hand and like, hey, I'm that person. And they're like, who ultimately wants to do that? Most people know, but you have the occasional person who's very, dramatic or kind of looking for that, attention-seeking behavior, which then, they are then kind of, I don't want to say outing themselves, but essentially like outing themselves as whatever character that has been written about. And that's kind of,
I've had people try to claim some of the things as their own. And I had to go back myself again and be like, what are they talking about? Like, what is yours? And with any book, you need references, you need character references. If I'm trying to build up a character, I have to give you an example. And an example may have been something that someone said to me that affected me. And I'm like, holy cow, I can't believe that happened. And it was so severe that it bothered me. Then you leave me in their care. And then I'm not supposed to feel a sort of way about this person whom I've been left with.
Yeah, it's also, you have a really good way of phrasing things. I really appreciate that.
I appreciate that. I can give you another example. The term parental. The term parental has been thrown around so many times at me from my family. And in my Rome brain, parental means anyone whose care you were left in outside of a parent is a parental. Whether it was an uncle, an aunt, a babysitter, they're your parental, whoever's in charge of you. My father was a hardworking man. He worked 2-3 jobs. Sometimes we had to be left in the care of other people. Those are the parentals that I refer to in the book. I don't want it to be, oh, his mother did this, his father did that. That's why we buried everyone in the book, like you said, so that it didn't go that route. I never wanted anyone to be like, holy crap, his parents were this or his parents were that. That's not the intent of this book. The intent of this book is for me to get everything that ever happened in my life off my mind. And that's what we did. We, like you said, we took out all the names. We took out all the titles. There's no mom, dad, brother, sister, uncle, aunt, whatever. We took that further and took out breadcrumbs. There's no, he wore a red shirt, this guy wears a red shirt, that guy works here, this person works there. There's none of that in the book. And then when you said, okay, we're good to go, I went back and changed it again and took the main character out of the book.
Which is so much work, because even when you're writing a standard memoir, when that happens, it's kind of easy to do like a find and replace of like, okay, this person's name was Jamie, I'm going to change it to Lauren, whatever the names are. With your stuff, which is why you said you went through it like 6 or 7 times and still went through it again, even though we were done. It's so much harder to the nuance of the language, because it is poetry and everything has a rhythm and there's a tempo to it, there's a pace to it, that when you're swapping out even one singular word, it can completely alter the entire meaning of that sentence. So for you to have done it as many times as you did is astonishing to me.
And the thing is, I went through this thing so many times. My goal was, I wanted this book to flow like a river. And I mean that wholeheartedly. I wanted you to go boom, ba boom, ba boom, ba boom through the entire book. I've been in books where it stalls. And it's like, I did not want that for myself. I did not want that for my story. And I didn't want that for my first poetry book. And the other thing is, a lot of people don't understand metaphor. I had someone say, Jerome, when did you ever stick an orange in your porridge? It rhymes. It's porridge is oatmeal. You know what I mean? Porridge is oatmeal. And if I was hit because I spilled my oatmeal on the floor. How do I make that rhyme?
Yeah.
And that was the intent. Like I said, I was emphatic. I really, Eminem is my guy. I love Eminem. And
Mhm.
Eminem says nothing rhymes with orange, and I'm like, well, I'm gonna rhyme some stuff with orange, and that's what I tried to do, and I made it mine.
Mhm.
And some people just don't grasp the concept of poetry, like what it's supposed to be in its art form, and that's what it is to me. It's an art form.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about the poetic art form is that with standard memoir, like you're like the genre itself kind of dictates that you are holding the truth as closely as possible of the real
Mm-hmm.
actual events. It's just minor details that kind of protect everybody's, protect the innocent, if you will. But
Right.
with poetry, you can do whatever the hell you want. And that's kind of a beautiful thing where you can make things rhyme and go together and not be the actual, like you said, like orange and porridge, like, come on, like, but like that's such a great example, and that's why there's such an art form to poetry in general. Like you can take that creative liberty, which is
Right.
brilliant.
But you'd be surprised. Like I said, I think people have ill intent, and I think they have agendas. But there are people that are say that's a lie, and I'm
Mhm.
like, how is that a lie? Like, I'm telling you my story through a poetic format, and I'm trying to make it rhyme while keeping the integrity of the truth.
Mhm.
And not very many words rhyme with the truth sometimes. You know what I mean? Like, so
Mhm.
you have to mix and match and arrange. And poetry to me is a labyrinth. In my mind, I'm moving this here, this looks better here, that goes better there. And I honestly think that, again, family members are just looking to pick it apart.
Yeah, and that happens with so many things. I have such a newfound respect for poetry in general because you did make that promise. Like you weren't kidding when you said it a few minutes ago. Like you're basically going to be a convert into poetry after having read this. And I was like, this is just amazing. And I feel like there's such just an art form that most people don't possess the labyrinth in their mind to be able to see how everything connects together. And it's just so incredibly impressive.
Thank you. Well, the thing is, like, I didn't want it to be Dr. Seuss. I didn't want to be the cat in the hat, the that and the that and the. I wanted to tell a story that flowed, and I wanted it to flow in my way, so that when you read it, you'd be like, "Oh, this is different. I've
Mm-hmm.
never read poetry like this."
Mm-hmm.
And that was always the goal. Was, like I said, to change the way people view poetry first and foremost, and then secondly, to let people know that they weren't alone in whatever they were dealing with in terms of abuse and things of those nature.
Mm-hmm. And to me, that's why PYP and I do what I do and the team does what they do, because it's a matter of helping other people feel seen and heard. So whatever crappy, shitty bullshit experience that you may have gone through, how can that be a learning lesson and to provide some kind of hope or inspiration for somebody else who might be in the throes of whatever that thing is. And I think that's a beautiful thing as well, because your book totally does that.
Well, that's the thing. Like, here I am trying to heal myself.
Mhm.
You've read the book, you know the content. I don't want to say too much because, I do want people to read it. But I've almost, I've come close to taking myself out of this world.
Mhm.
And for family members to make it from cover to cover and not give a rat's ass that their relative, I'm not going to say their
Mhm.
relative, like, came that close because of things that you've put me through.
Mhm.
And that's the thing that really like bothers me the most, is like, without those incidents there's no book.
Mhm.
How could I make you look like a scumbag if there's no incidents?
Mhm. Yeah, it's not you didn't dictate their behaviors. They did those things and you're just telling your truth.
Well, that's the thing. I'm constantly defending myself,
Mm.
and that's the burden that I bear. Like, I'm no matter what I do, I'm going to be wrong. No
Mhm.
matter how I say it, it's going to be wrong. No matter who it's towards, it's going to be wrong.
Mhm.
I got family coming together and like, I read this. What did you read? Well, I read that. Okay, let's put them together, and this is what we read.
Oh my
Like, you know what I mean? Like,
oof, that's rough. Well, with that being said, would you change anything?
absolutely not.
I didn't think so.
No.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you another example, and I'm going to tell you exactly why. Again, I was contacted by a family friend, someone that knows all of the shits,
Mm-hmm.
and they said to me, "I can't believe you didn't murder these people. You could have said so much more, and I
Mm-hmm.
commend you for not." Like, I literally took out, took out, took out, took out,
Mm-hmm.
and still delivered a product that tells a story that could help someone else get through a hard time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's such a fine balance that every writer has to go through to figure out what that balance is of how much do you tell without telling too much, but telling enough that your reader can follow and actually they themselves can feel seen and heard.
In my eyes, I destroyed some of the best poems in this book trying to cover for other people.
Yeah.
I had some rhymes in there that were amazing
Mm-hmm.
that I cut from the book to save someone's face.
Yeah.
That was never the intent. And that's what I keep telling people. This wasn't for you.
Yeah.
Stop saying it's you. Stop saying it's yours. Stop trying to claim ownership over my shit.
Mm-hmm.
These were my thoughts. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if something happened in your life and you told me and it bothered me to a point where I can't sleep, that's mine.
Mm-hmm.
And if I write that from my point of view, you can write your own story. This
Mm-hmm.
one's mine.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's
And
beautiful.
that's the way I went. That's the way I went through the whole thing. And that's what I still try to explain to people, but I don't think people want to hear the truth. I don't think they're looking for the truth. I think they're looking to throw a pity party. And that's why I wrote the pity party poem.
Yeah. And I think that what's great is that, your family's not your audience. Anyone watching this, if you're writing your memoir, your family is not your audience. Like, that's the bottom line. Your audience are the people who need to hear what you have to say because they're going through something similar and they need hope or inspiration or something to help them get through the other side. It's not, none of us are writing it for the sake of our family. Like, and that's the kind of the
Well,
bottom.
with all that said, and I don't mean to cut you off,
No.
I have family members that came through and said, "Thank you.
Mm.
You pieced together some puzzle pieces. You put this together for us." Or, "This makes sense why I went through what I went through because now we know your side of what happened."
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So it went both ways. I'm not gonna exclude anybody because there have been supportive family members,
Mm-hmm.
and quite honestly, I probably couldn't have gotten through the last month without them.
Mm. That's awesome. Well, as we're kind of coming to our the top of our time, is there anything that you want to share, mention, words of wisdom for those who might be just starting on this journey themselves?
I would say if you're a family member, don't try and bring down others on the person who wrote the book's behalf.
Mm.
The person that wrote the book is responsible, no one else. They have their own thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a writer going into this process, keep it 100 with yourself. Don't worry about anybody else. Keep it 100 with yourself. As long as you're happy with the outcome. I prayed on this for 9 years. Literally, I put myself in the hospital. Like I said, I've cried more than I've ever wanted to cry in my entire life over this book. And I made it through the end.
Mm-hmm.
Why publish a book has been the biggest question asked by my family. Like, you could have burned it. Because that wouldn't have been the closure. The closure is letting you know that you put me through all this shit for 40 some years. It was in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's out and I don't have to carry it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the bottom line is I carried this for so long that it hurt. Mm-hmm. Now I go in my backyard, I can look at the sun and I'm like, holy cow, I'm free. Like, and I know that sounds corny as hell, but that's the feeling. Like, I can walk around like I'm free.
I don't think it sounds corny at all. I think it's so powerful and so true. I think so many people have that transformative experience when it's like you are fully free from this and well beyond, your years on this planet, your book will live on. And I think there's something so amazing about that to me, just from a publisher perspective. Just know that, when you're no longer here, your story still lives on in the way that you wanted it told, not how other people are retelling it.
Well, that was the thing, is like, I always want to control my narrative. I don't want someone saying, no, that's not true. This is the way it was, or that was the way it was. Like, there are people that looked at me and were like, what the hell is he going to write about? His
Mm,
life is perfect. And then I dropped this book and they're like, where was all that? Like,
mhm,
that was in here. That was the problem. That's why I am who I am. I've
mhm.
never had a sip of alcohol in my life. I'm 44 years old.
It's amazing.
I've never done a drug in my life. I don't take any prescription pills. I don't do anything that is outside of doing right or wrong. And that's the way I approach everything. It's
Mhm,
either right or wrong. It's clear cut. It's right or wrong. And this book was not wrong. Not in
mhm.
my eyes.
Not at all. And I think what's amazing is that based on all of the things that you write in your book, you easily could have gone down any type of addiction path as a result of just all of the compounding trauma, and you didn't. And I think for that, like that alone is just remarkable.
Well, that's the thing. It's all about surviving. Well, like, from an early age, it was survival. Like,
Mhm,
and I don't get into the exact details
mhm,
because those are still, like, I didn't want to tell anyone else's truth, and that's what I keep trying to explain to people. Like, I could have said a lot more. Believe me, I took out everything that could have incriminated anyone.
mhm,
If you're feeling a sort of way, it's because you're feeling a sort of way.
mhm. Yeah, there's a that is a very fine line of what is your story to share versus what is someone else's story to share. And I think you struck that balance very well.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
This was such a good conversation. I so appreciate you being here to talk about your book. And then, of course, your website is tappedpoetry.com and your book is available in all of the different places. But I believe you still have copies that you are signing and mailing out, correct? So if,
Correct.
good. So if someone is watching this and they want a signed copy, which even I as a publisher, you think I would get bored with signed copies of things. I don't. I get just as excited as if I've never met an author before in my entire life. So I would highly encourage you to check out Rome's website and get your copy there. And if not, it's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books a Million, all of the places. But Rome, I know you're also very active on social media, and I know
Hmm.
I've seen you do poetry readings and things like that. So can you just tell people what that is and where to find it?
I am on Instagram at poetic.rome, Facebook as Poetic Rome, and Twitter Poetic Rome.
Beautiful. It's very, very simple to remember. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to reconnecting again soon.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you,
Yeah, you bet.
and thank you for everything you did for me. It's been a blessing.
Aw, you're very welcome.